Repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all here. Thanks for showing up. Anyone here for the first time? What brings you here?
I actually live in Michigan, and I am here on vacation. And I just was on a plane this morning, and something was like, go to a temple, or I go to a temple, and this one called out to me, and there was this class. So
That's rad.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Try topping that one, the rest of you. Yeah, that's great. Well, welcome. Do you have a place in Michigan you practice?
I'm actually very new to the Dharma and Buddhism.
Yeah.
I just did a silent meditation retreat this weekend with the Swami, and it was the same kind of, something was just telling me, be quiet and listen, be quiet and listen. And my little tea bag one night said, be quiet, the one who listens understands. And that was my first time at a temple like 3 days ago.
Do I need to say anything else? She's making this very easy for me. Well, welcome. We're glad you're here. What else? Who else is new? Good luck. Yeah. What brings you here?
My friend.
Your friend. What did your friend say?
It's amazing.
It's amazing. That's setting the bar pretty high, you know. What else? Who's new? A couple other hands. Yeah.
My friend has been telling me for many years, you should come. So that's why I'm here.
Years it took, huh?
Like 4.
4 years.
I'm a little bit slow.
We're stubborn, man. I don't know what to tell you. What's that?
It'll probably take another 4 years
Before he comes back. Yeah, it's all right. Well, we're glad you made it, you know. I remember my first night at a temple, and I talked to the nun afterwards, and I was like, I'll be back tomorrow. I'm never leaving this place. 6 months went by before I even walked back in. So, you know, when we feel like going, we go. When we don't, we don't. You know, both are beautiful. But yeah, welcome. One more in the back. Yeah.
Yeah, I just, I think it's, I don't know, spirituality is kind of big in my life, and I like the listening part of this practice.
Yeah.
So it helps me listen better.
For sure. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, listening is it's an interesting thing because, you know, for me, this practice is, as I always talk about, it's like a mirror, you know, and it's just kind of reflecting back. And when we look in the mirror, we reflect back on us, you know, our thoughts, our words, our actions. And so the practice is really, it's an opportunity to listen, to hear the Dharma, to hear the teachings, to hear what the practice is about. But ultimately, all of that is just pointing to, can we listen to ourselves? And what's in our mind? What's in our heart? What are our thoughts? What are our words? What are our actions? So the more we pay attention to what's actually going on within us, that's how we kind of transform and change things in our lives. You know, very often, especially if you're newer to this stuff, we might think that we need to learn more about Buddhism or more about meditation or more about, you know, whatever else goes along with that. And a lot of that stuff is fun and interesting and kind of cool and neat, and it's new and there's lots to read. But ultimately, it just comes down to how much you know about yourself. And that's an interesting one because how do most people feel about themselves most of their lives?
Not great.
Not great. from like this to not great, you know? I mean, most people who end up in places like this don't feel wonderful about themselves their whole lives. You know, if you did, you usually don't end up, well, maybe we got one. You know, you usually don't end up in places like this, right? But when you begin to kind of explore yourself and you realize like, wow, maybe I don't like myself or I don't love the views I have of myself, that's what you begin to dig into. And then you begin to dig into the fact that that's an illusion as well. That story that you said to yourself about yourself is just some made up nonsense you've been telling yourself. So when that all falls away and you continue to listen to what's going on, you really begin to see how you can make changes in your life that actually benefit you and those around you. But it takes courage, you know, especially if you're one who doesn't like yourself. It's not easy to listen to yourself. You know, anyone here have someone in their life they don't like? How often do you want to listen to them? Right? Not so much. So the same thing is if you don't like yourself, and then this practice requires to listen to yourself, well, now you're being forced to listen to someone that you don't like, which is yourself. That's not fun. But that's what this practice is. So, good luck. To those who are joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here. Thanks for showing up. Feel free to say hello as you are. Somewhere on your screen there's a chat box. We'll start with the meditation practice. For those who are new, maybe sitting for the first time, a couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences, most likely. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often it helps sliding to the front third, pushing the stomach forward. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated, also just trying to sit up straight, relax the shoulders. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. If you need to move during meditation, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator. It just means you need to move. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important with this practice, do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. Eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath, expecting nothing. but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting and breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath Nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And when ready, slowly opening the eyes. Slowly beginning to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to every other 20-minute period of your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, and focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Imagine going a day without being disturbed by someone. Imagine going an hour without being disturbed by someone. Most people won't even make it out of the temple before they're disturbed. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. It is direct perception into the present moment. And as we all know too well, the present moment is very often filled with conflict, chaos, difficulty, challenges. And so this practice isn't running away from any of that. It's learning to see it for what it is and be with it as it arises. And that can be difficult because most of our lives we're used to running from things. Away from things we don't like, towards things we like. And so we're constantly running. And this practice is about sitting with, or standing with, or being with life as it occurs. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do in every moment. And that's it. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything outside of us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets simpler. But like I said, it's a practice. And it does take time. It requires patience, first and foremost, with yourself. For some reason, we think we can read, 3 Buddhist books and attend meditation for 6 months, and all of a sudden our life is supposed to drastically be better. I often talk about how early on with meditation and Buddhist practice, it might make your life a little bit worse. And I mean that very honestly, because, we the Buddha called it dukkha, but suffering, discomfort, angst, we kind of just built a life that we're used to. And even in the suffering, we just get used to it. It's like, well, that sucks. It's all right. I'm used to it. Well, that's miserable. It's okay. I've been with that for 20 years. Okay? And so when you begin to look at your life, your thoughts, your words, your actions very honestly and authentically and genuinely, you start to kind of question why you do what you do and why you say what you say and why you think what you think. That kind of rattles your cage a little bit. And we don't typically like that. So this practice, for the first, I always say, couple years, it can really make things difficult because you're learning to be with all the chaos that you've created in your life, all the chaos that's in your life, and you're facing it. Running is easy, but running gets tiring. Sitting with things is very challenging. So as you begin to become more mindful and aware of what you think and what you say and what you do, you'll see things in your life may change. Places you go may change. People you spend time with may change. Right? And that can be a challenge. Because a lot of people don't like change. But as I always say, suffering sucks. So learn to wake up to what your suffering is, the cause of it, which is pretty much you and your own mind. As much as we'd love to blame everyone else and everything else and every other place for all of our misery, it's on us. We have a hard enough time changing our own thoughts and words and actions, yet somehow we think we can control and change others. So with that, I'll pause. For me, really, I always just prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, and we use the rest of our brief time this evening, and I'll respond to questions. For those who are joining virtually, thanks again, glad you're here. Feel free as you are, say hello, or there's a chat box there. If you have any questions, you can put them on the screen, and I'll do my best to respond. So we'll open up to questions.
Hi, can you explain karma and how it may or may not relate to reincarnation?
Sure. So the question was, for those who didn't hear it, can I explain karma and how it may or may not relate to reincarnation? So let me first start with karma. Karma is one of the 2 most misunderstood, in my opinion, words in kind of Western culture around Buddhist teachings. Very often karma, people think is what? If you haven't heard me say this before, what do you think karma is? What comes around goes around. And that is the most selfish Western view of what karma is. Because when we say what comes around, goes around, comes around, who's it all about? Me. Right? which is ironic because Buddhism says there is no me, there is no self. But karma gets translated as what goes around comes around. Karma literally means action. That's the literal translation of the word karma, action. And as the Buddha taught, we generate karma 3 ways: body, speech, mind. What we think, what we say, and what we do. This is what creates our karma. Thoughts, words, and actions. Thus the phrase, think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds. That is, in essence, addressing exactly our karma. The example I always like to give with karma is, if you ever played pool, right? Seen a pool table, you hit the cue ball into the rack, right? The white ball goes into the rack. It's all the rest on the table. Every time that cue ball hits the rack, every ball goes into a different direction. Every single time. Now, our lives, we are that cue ball. Every person, place, and thing we encounter, we leave an imprint on. And so that's where the kind of phrase, be mindful of your karma, it's not about being mindful of what you get. Karma is not getting, karma is giving. We are the cue ball. It's what we bring into the world, not what we get from it. Karma also isn't about right and wrong. It's not about good or bad. It's not about laws, right? So I haven't given this example in a long time because I always used to say I should stop giving this example, but I'll give it anyways, right? If I walk across the street and a bus comes by and hits me, right? You can see why I stopped giving this example. Who's karmically responsible for that?
The bus driver.
Wrong. Wrong. Say again?
You walked across the street.
I walked across the street. If my dumb ass hadn't walked across the street, I wouldn't have been hit by the bus. This is a really heavy one for us to embrace. Right? It's not the bus driver's fault. It's not my fault. It's just what happens. Karma is what happens. It is the law of cause and effect. And this is really difficult for us to understand. Well, actually, it's easy for us to, I think, conceptualize. It's very difficult for us to put into our lives when we have had very painful, heavy things happen to us. Because anyone who's gone through, and I spent 25 years working with trauma survivors, from children to adults to military, active, combat veterans, anytime we experience heavy trauma, we want to look for someone to what? To blame. Now, karma doesn't excuse what people do. It's not saying that someone that has caused you trauma, karma doesn't say, well, they were right in doing that. That's what I mean when I say karma is not about right or wrong. Karma is literally just what happens. So we want to say the bus driver is to blame, it's their fault. Well, if I hadn't stepped on the street, the bus driver would have kept going. So I'm equally as responsible. Again, this gets real heavy when you look at traumatic situations, when you look at death, when you look at rape, when you look at murder, when you look at really heavy things. What it does is it doesn't assign blame. It takes all of that away. It's just the law of cause and effect. Really heavy. So when we begin to understand that karma is just what happens, that makes sense so far? Well, you don't have to like it, but that's you don't have to agree with it either. You know me, I don't do this stuff for people to agree with me.
A little bit of the cause and effect is hard.
Why?
Well, because if, for example, if someone was raped,
Right.
how did that person cause that?
I bring up those examples again from having sat and never experienced that, so I have no idea what that's like, obviously. But it's not about causing. That's why I say things like murder, things like rape, real heavy traumatic things, we don't like to apply karma to it because that doesn't sit well with us. But why am I responding to you right now?
Because I asked a question. Okay. Action.
We're just both here. If I'm not here and you're not there, this conversation is not happening. Again, not about blame, not about fault, not about laws, not about what's legal, not about what's disgusting to do. It's the reality of what's actually happening. People end up at places at certain times. That's what happens. Really difficult for us to separate karma from heavy situations. I get that. But I just pointed out because usually when I go on to the bus example, someone is sitting here with that story in their head, drawing that parallel to their life. And so I just jump straight to that because that's the reality. So things happen. I'm here, you're there, you're asking a question. That's why I'm responding to you. That's the karma. It's the action. Now, our karma is, well, let me just pause there. So, again, difficult to embrace, but does it make sense conceptually?
Yes.
Yeah, and then you can sit with it for like the next 6 years and you know, work on that. So the second piece is around, you know, how does that tie into reincarnation? Let me just pause here for a moment and touch on this for those who might be new to Buddhism. At the time of the Buddha, 2,500 years ago, 500 years before Christ, in India, for the most part, everybody there believed in rebirth, reincarnation, continuation of consciousness, whatever you want to call it, depending upon the culture, right? If you said to somebody 2,500 years ago that you got one life and then you're going to heaven or hell, they would have thought you were pretty crazy, right? You fast forward to today and you say to people, hey, you're going to be reborn, and they think you're nuts. So when the Buddha was alive, teaching, he was just teaching at a different time where people had different beliefs. They all thought they were going to be reborn. They all thought they would be reincarnated or that their consciousness would continue. Nobody at that time thought, for the most part, that they were going to die and that was it. Whether they were going to die and go to heaven or hell. Well, actually, technically they did, but we don't want to get into the hell realms right now because that's not your question, right? But the reality is, and I'll come back to the karma piece, how many of you showed up here tonight because you're concerned about your rebirth? It's just not happening. People are here because they're stressed out, they're anxious, they're sad, they're whatever, you know. They were on a plane from Michigan and they decided to show up here. Whatever reason, you end up here, but it's probably not because you're worried about how you're going to be reborn. That was what they were concerned with. Now, to kind of drive that home, a couple things. One, you don't need to believe in rebirth, reincarnation, or continuation of consciousness to practice or learn or be interested in Buddhism. It's completely irrelevant. But here's my suggestion. Are you concerned with waking up tomorrow and being a happier, kinder, gentler person?
Yes.
Yeah, so tomorrow is your rebirth. An hour from now, would you like to be a kinder, gentler, happier person? That didn't make sense, but you got it. So an hour from now, you're working on how are you going to be happier, kinder, gentler an hour from now or tomorrow? By doing what? In this moment. Reincarnation, continuation of consciousness, rebirth, in essence, is the same thing. No different. Focus on what you do now, your karma. That will determine the future. Where we end up. The life we create. And while we're focused on what our karma, thoughts, words, and actions that we're bringing into the world, into the environment, into our families, our friends, our relationships, our colleagues, we're also impacting, obviously, the people around us. Now, we might think that if we encounter people and we're kind and gentle, that means we're going to get that back. But by now, we pretty much know life doesn't work that way. You can be kind and gentle to someone, and they might not be kind and gentle to you at all. Then what do? Be kinder and gentler, because that's what they need. But I'm sure you're all good at that anyways. What else? Other questions? Yeah.
I've been really struggling to, I've been coming here for a little over a year and taking these ideas somewhat seriously, seriously enough for about that amount of time. And I've, for several months now, really been struggling with the part of your kind of intro speech where I still want to be successful and motivated, but I'm also just reacting to the things that happen because in my about 10 years of basically since I got out of college and became a real person, I've started, especially very recently, to realize I've only been running either from things that I don't think I want and to things that I do think I want, and then I get to the thing that I think I want, and then that's cool for, I don't know, a little while, and then I get bored or restless or otherwise discontent. And I'm at a point right now where I'm like, I've taken I took a lot of risks, like, you know, get a new job in the last year. My relationship is, you know, whatever. That's also running into the train of thought here, just like the life that I have created by driving towards the things that I think I want, and change is happening, is just like, I still, you know, have that ultimately like unsatisfied, like what am I actually working towards feeling?
Yeah.
And I know you're not my therapist, but
I'm cheaper than your therapist, that's for sure. Yeah.
I can't imagine that that's a unique train of thought.
No.
And I just don't, you know, as I sit and meditate on my own,
Yeah.
I just have that kind of like deep wanting of like, show me something, but that becomes counterproductive on its own. And
I get it.
Yeah.
So I definitely will not try to paraphrase that for those at home. But so beautiful.
Not for me, but
No, really beautiful for you. 2 thumbs up. You're completely confused,
yes.
and you should be. It goes back to what I said tonight, which I don't always say, but how these first couple years, I said the first 2 years, you're a year in. The first 2 years, your life is going to be a shit show if you're actually practicing this stuff. Because it will make you completely question everything about your life. From family, relationships, work, you know, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, I'm glad you didn't blame me for your job and all that kind of stuff, but, you know, it really will make you question. I mean, the Buddhist teachings, one of the Eightfold Path is right livelihood. Right? So in the Vinaya at the time, you know, when he was teaching, it was, you know, don't be a butcher, don't run a gambling house, don't run a brothel, right? My guess is you're probably not doing either of those 3 things, right? Fast forward to today, livelihood. To me, the practice around right livelihood is just for you to begin to explore. If kindness and compassion is important to you, look at what your livelihood is and how that impacts the world around you. To me, I think that's for the average person who's practicing or even just learning about Buddhism. I think livelihood is good to just explore, what is my livelihood? And it's a means to support myself, to support my family. Those things are really important. And not to get too wrapped up in, do I have the perfect livelihood? Am I aligning with every little Buddhist teaching on livelihood? But it requires us to kind of explore, what are the reasons I do what I do to make a living, to make, you know, to earn an income? Just explore it. And if you're unhappy, then obviously maybe there's a shift that has to happen there, right? Same thing in relationships. You know, relationships are really difficult. Whether they're intimate relationships, friendships, you know, family, things like that, they're all difficult. And when you start to look at what you think and what you say and what you do, and you're trying to come from a place of kindness and compassion, that will really challenge all of those relationships. And like I said, the reason I said you're exactly where you should be is, yeah, you're a year into just a massive state of confusion. But let's just go back a year plus ago, and maybe you were even more ignorant than you are now. Right? You're kind of waking up to, this is my life, and I could die at any moment.
Ignorance is bliss.
Ignorance was bliss. Yes. Ignorance is no longer bliss. I mean, you know, this is to me, the thing I love about Buddhist practice is I finally met something that I couldn't win. I couldn't beat it. I couldn't conquer it. I couldn't be the best at it. I just had to sit down and shut up and look at my crazy head. And then start to figure out, what am I doing with my time? How am I spending my time? What's important to me? And then when you put that into play, there's no long-term plan. But most of us are stuck in their 50-year plan. Just focus on what you do. Coming back to the question about karma, just focus on what you do in each moment and let life unfold. And yes, you can have a long-term plan, you know. There's nothing wrong with that. but we don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. And yet somehow we have the next 30 years of our lives mapped out. You know? I'm pretty sure in the first map you drew, it didn't have you ending up here on a Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. So shatter the map, shatter the idea of what you think is supposed to happen, and just embrace the massive state of confusion as cutting through the ignorance that we've been living with for so long. So, congratulations. Graduated to year 2. What else? Yeah.
I have some health problems, one of which is epilepsy. I wake up in the middle of the night, either my wife shaking me and calling my name, or a paramedic next to me, or even in an ambulance. And I met with my neurologist yesterday, and we went through my seizures and realized it's been 6 months since I've had a seizure, which is amazing. Gratitude is a big part of my life, and when I was a Christian, it was I'm grateful to Jesus or God or whatever. I didn't cause epilepsy on myself, and I didn't make it go into remission, for lack of a better word. What am I grateful to?
Sounds like you're just grateful to not have had seizures for the last 6 months.
For
Beautiful.
sure, it feels
No, stop. So, for you know, without getting into the whole comparative religious thing right now, like, it's beautiful, all religions, that we can be grateful, if that's your belief, towards someone or thank someone or all. That's wonderful. With Buddhism, that doesn't really exist so much, but it's still beautiful that, you know, like even you referenced another religion, like thank you to whoever. Great. The Buddhist practice is just about being grateful for each moment. And you just said you haven't had a seizure in 6 months. Who should you be grateful for? Why do you have to be grateful or towards? Why do you have to be grateful towards someone? That's just your old conditioning telling you that I must thank somebody. Just have gratitude for this simple sake of what it is. You don't need to assign someone to it. You don't need to assign blame. You don't need to assign credit. Like you said, you didn't cause it. You didn't, cause it to go into remission. Like, you don't need to assign things. We don't have to give blame or credit to everyone for everything. Just be grateful. Be happy yourself. Did you ever think about that? That whole self that we're trying to, shatter and not get caught up in? Well, as Dogen said, the great Zen master, you must get to know the self before you can get rid of the self. So everyone who's trying to shatter their ego, stop, because that's your ego trying to shatter your ego. Get to know your ego, get to know yourself, and it's beautiful. So, congrats. Yeah.
So if you're, I agree with you.
Great.
I'm not saying
I'm here to be agreed with.
well, I would say I believe in that same thing. Which makes neither one of us right or wrong, but I'm in that same vein.
Yeah.
But what it brought up for me was the question of, why do we always do a dedication of merit?
Yeah.
Like when we go downtown,
Yeah.
we give out sandwiches, etc.
Yeah.
The dedication of merit, or at other points along the way here.
I'm just looking to see how much time we have left.
Oh.
So the question is around a dedication of merit. So for those, go ahead. Is that
I'm
it?
done.
Okay. So the question is, you understand, you agree with this idea of not having to give, credit or blame or thanks to whoever. But then your question is, why then do we do a transfer of merit? Why would you do a transfer of merit when we feed the homeless downtown, when various other times? So at the end of the class tonight, what I'm going to ask you all to do is I'm going to say if you can all join palms, and then we do what's called a transfer of merit. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. That's what a transfer of merit is, and it happens various ways in different Buddhist traditions, different Buddhist cultures, all differently, right? So the question is why? So now I'm going to completely, and this is the beauty of Buddhism, now I'm going to completely shatter and contradict probably everything I just said for the last 20 minutes. And in what I call cultural Buddhism, right? And in the Buddhism that I I mean, I wasn't raised Buddhist, but in the Buddhism that came into my life, 25 years ago, it was through Zen, Pure Land, Taiwanese practice. And without turning this into the whole, very briefly, as you've heard me say many times, people always ask, is Buddhism a religion or a philosophy? Western folks would tend to call it philosophy because people get burnt out on religion for the most part and end up here and they're like, I don't like religion, that's why I'm at the Dharma Bum Temple, right? It's like, look, you can call Buddhism whatever you want. For most people practice it in the West, yes, they practice it and view it as a philosophy and a way of life. Beautiful, great, Buddhists don't care what you call it, right? But for 2,500 years, it's also practiced religiously around the world. And so if you went into a Thailand or Thai temple, Taiwanese temple, Lao, Cambodian, Japanese temple, and you told them this is just philosophy and a way of life, it's kind of insulting to them. It would be like going into the Catholic Church and saying, hey, that's not a religion. To them, it is practiced religiously. And they have devout, faith-based practice. And they have Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that they pray to, and that they make vows to, and that they transfer merit to and for. So that exists heavily in Buddhism. It's not what rolls into the Dharma Bum Temple here for the last 18 years. It's literally why we created the Dharma Bum Temple, because we came out of that culture of Buddhism and realized that the average Western person is not going to do that stuff. We have a hard enough time getting you to close the damn bathroom door, right? Let alone like be on your knees, bowing and chanting into all these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas from all time and all space and all directions, right? I started to touch on it earlier when I made the comment about heaven or hell, but Buddhism also teaches hell realms and heaven realms. They're not pleasant. You don't want to go there, But that's part of the culture in India at the time and in the Buddhist teachings. The Buddha didn't invent this stuff. That's what they all believed in. Again, coming back to rebirth, reincarnation, continuation of consciousness. Most Buddhists around the world believe in that stuff in Asian cultures. Western Buddhists were like, no, I just want to meditate and make everything okay. Right? So coming back to the transfer of merit, for me very personally, from a Pure Land Buddhist practice, you are literally, the belief is that, and it is my personal practice, it's not what I share, because it's not what most people want to know, but the belief is that yes, there are levels of rebirth, or not levels, there are places that you are reborn into. And so there is consciousness floating all around, waiting to be reborn. And so when you transfer merit, you've heard me say we do it the general one, and then when somebody we know from here, if they ask me to do it, which is usually what happens, and somebody, they know someone has passed away, and they ask, can you transfer merit for that person? The teaching, especially in Tibetan Buddhism, is that at some point in 49 days, that consciousness that leaves the body will be reborn. So you're actually transferring merit for that consciousness to have a good rebirth. So it comes from the belief that there is a continuation. That's where it comes from. And so for me as the practice, as you know, is very important to me. Some of that kind of ritual stuff, I really just keep more personal. If all of a sudden everybody came in here and we shaved our heads and put on robes and started bowing and chanting, there'd be like 6 of you. So, does that help?
Yeah.
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 And the belief very specifically, and that's the Amitabha Buddha, this first hunker right here, is that there's the Buddha's Pure Land, just as an example. And so the idea in the Pure Land Buddhism is that if you meditate, recite the Buddha's name and follow precepts, that when you die, you can be reborn into the Pure Land where there is no suffering. Sounds kind of like heaven, right? So all of that stuff exists in Buddhism. But like I said, people don't come here for the most part to have a good rebirth, nor to know where they're going to be reborn. They come here because they're angry, pissed off, and they want shit to go their way. Yeah. What else? Right? It's not going to happen. Just stop. When you stop wanting it to go your way, then it goes perfectly.
Or go to a therapist.
Say again?
Or go to a therapist.
Or go to a therapist, yeah. As I always say, half the people here are therapists, the other half are in therapy. And half the therapists are in therapy. Same jokes.
Still in.
Yeah, no. What else? Yeah.
Okay, I guess this kind of dives into exactly what you didn't want to dive into
Yeah.
the health.
That's all right. I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, that's where I guess I'm kind of inquisitive. I think that my perception of it that isn't really based off of any thing that I've read is just that once you realize that the control is the perspective and you control in your mind how it is, you kind of dictate your frequency or how you feel. And the way that I believe reality is a mirror, because we are, that we attract what is at the same frequency as us. So my perception is when you go and you get past the matter and this life, then wherever you were, you attract that same experience then again. Is that similar to what the Buddhists, like what the understanding is in that sense?
Yeah, sort of. So the reason I say sort of is that there's, and you can if you've never come across it yet, you can Google this. It's called Yogacara, Yogacara, or maybe Chara, depends on how you see it. But Yogacara roughly translates to the mind-only school in Buddhism. And it very much is similar to what you're talking about, because ultimately, one thing I love about, and I'll kind of close with these thoughts, one thing I love about the Buddhist teachings around rebirth, reincarnation, or continuation of consciousness is that, so when I was at the monastery, there was a monk who taught life and death studies. And what he said was that the mistake that most people make around rebirth is that we think that we have this life, and that when this physical body dies, that then there's going to be the next life, and that there was a past life. What he said is that's the mistake. It's all one continuous, endless life that just comes together in this physical form for a period of time. And then that physical form, the body, which is the shell, ceases to exist, and that continuation of consciousness continues. What's that old movie at the end? It's like, time, I can't sing, but it's on my side. Yes, it is. And the body, the spirit is going from my body to body to body. Anybody got me here? Somebody help me out? Kind of a scary, spooky movie with Denzel Washington. Say again?
The one that's Satan jumping around?
It might be.
With
Denzel Washington. Yeah, so the scene at the end of that, well, in this case, we're not talking about Satan, but it's kind of like that your consciousness moves from body to body, right? That's the idea. And so we mistake this as my life. But ultimately, the consciousness is not form at all. It's not matter. It's just consciousness. And this idea and this teaching is that consciousness for endless time has been around and will be around for endless time. Now our bodies come together and we give us this life, and someone's like, I'm born, and they're like, that's Jeff, and then they give me a name, and then I'm like, what are these? These are fingers, and then, I'm crawling, and someone's like, yay, you can crawl, and all these conditions start to happen to shape this identity and this sense of self and this ego that I call Jeff. But ultimately, this is just a consciousness that's been around for endless time and will be around for endless time. But I think that this Jeff is so important. That's the mistake. Now, the thing about, and I'm kind of jumping around here, but just to touch on a few things, the thing about that I referenced earlier about the heaven and hell realms and things like that, one of the teachings I got, which I really loved, is that the hell realms and heaven realms are states of mind. That they're not necessarily physical places that you go to, the way we might think of going to heaven or going to hell. But, you wake up one day, you're miserable and depressed, and you think your life needs to end. And then by like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you think you're like the greatest person in the world, right? So in one day, our mind, our consciousness can be in heaven and it can be in hell. That makes sense? I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Isn't that kind of, they have this teaching of Earth being this middle place where both can happen, whereas the other two places as a different place?
So
that's completely different.
Yeah, not to me, and there's only so much that I know and there's a lot that I don't know, but to me, not specific to Buddhist teachings, but that doesn't mean that Buddhist teachings have defined everything. I mean, there's tons of spiritual teachings, Native American teachings, tons of beautiful teachings out there that go into many different avenues around that, which are excellent. But the one thing I want to point out where I said sort of, when you said is that kind of in line with Buddhist teachings, is that the part that doesn't really align with Buddhist teachings was the part where you said that like a certain frequency aligns with another frequency. At least according to Buddhist teachings, to my understanding, is it's not about frequencies aligning with frequencies. It's just consciousness moving through, regardless of what kind of frequency they're at. But that's also not an area that I have studied much of anything. But in Buddhist teachings, it's not anything necessarily that I've come across it with. Because often people will make an example of, and I'll close with this thought, that like people come to places like this and they'll say things like, oh, I like to be around like-minded people. And my comment always is like, look, I know most of you, and you don't want to be like the person that's next to you. So we're not like-minded, right? Our frequencies didn't put us here. Our trauma, our pain, our suffering put us here. We're all in different places in our lives. We all ended up here on a Tuesday at 7 o'clock. So that would be the only difference that I would see kind of from the Buddhist side. But look at Yogacara, and especially Tibetan Buddhism talks a lot about rebirth, I think in a very clear way. I mean, as clear as it can be.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to close on that, and we'll do our transfer of merit. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit be transferred at this moment to those who need it most. All right, before y'all head out, our Dharma Bum host, Eddie, has a few announcements. And I have one. If there's anyone in this room and it's your birthday today and you would not want me to embarrass you and sing to you, I'm still going to wish you a happy birthday.
Hello everyone, I'm tonight's host. My name is Eddie. We opened the Dharma Bum Temple 18 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They are simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone with addiction, and our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and also posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We have a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it and then bring it back whenever you are done with it. Please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out. If a few people could stay to close and latch the windows, that would be helpful. Thank you for being here. We wish you